Rita Mae Brown once said, language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they are going. And I think she nailed it, because you can learn every word in the English language and still not understand British people. Language without culture is just noise. So today, as always, instead of just giving you a vocabulary list, I've got a short story inspired by one of the greatest British comedies ever made. It aired in the 70s, and 3 decades later, it was voted the greatest British TV programme of all time. I've deliberately kept the language to mostly B1 or lower intermediate, but I've sprinkled in a bunch of natural B2 and C1 expressions throughout. So, see you on the other side, and I hope to see if you can guess the show. But yeah, let's jump into it right now. Okay, so the Shellbrook Hotel. Let's begin. There are, along the English coastline, a number of small hotels that exist in a state of quiet desperation. They are not quite good enough to attract visitors on purpose, and not quite bad enough to be reported to anyone. They survive year after year on a combination of faded carpet, optimistic website photography, and the fact that somebody has already paid a deposit. The Shellbrook Hotel in Torquay was one such establishment. It had 3 stars, though if pressed, even the owner might have admitted that one of those was aspirational. It was into this establishment on a wet Tuesday in October that a Frenchman named Olivier Desrosiers walked carrying a single suitcase and a reasonable expectation of competence. He would leave the following morning with the suitcase and very little else. The lobby was narrow. It smelled of furniture polish and something harder to identify. Perhaps the ghost of a more successful decade. Behind the front desk stood Geoffrey Rigby, the owner, a tall, thin man in a blazer that had been purchased when he was, one suspects, a slightly different shape. He was arranging a vase of flowers with the focus of a man defusing a bomb. Now, if you want to go deeper on the expressions from today's episode, I've put together a vocabulary worksheet that breaks down the best phrases with clear definitions written for non-native speakers, example sentences, common collocations, and the natural situations where you'd actually use them. There are also some interactive quizzes in there to help you lock everything in. Honestly, the research shows that actively testing yourself on new vocabulary can triple your retention compared to just listening. So if you want to get 3 times the value out of this lesson, you can scan the QR code on screen or click that link that is in the description box, show notes, or comments section. That link will take you to this page. Fill in your name and email so that I can send the free worksheet directly to your email inbox. Olivier approached the desk, smiled politely, and gave his name. Geoffrey received it the way an English person receives most French words, with enthusiasm, courage, and no accuracy whatsoever. Desrosiers, he repeated, as though announcing a minor aristocrat at a village fete. He then turned to his computer and typed with a single finger, then 2 fingers, then a frown. What followed was a performance familiar to anyone who has ever watched a man to appear calm while being visibly nothing of the sort. Geoffrey explained, in a sentence that contained no fewer than 4 full starts, that the booking did not appear to exist. Oh no. Olivier, who had not yet been in England for a full hour, produced the confirmation email on his phone. Geoffrey examined it at arm's length, with the expression of a man being shown something in a language he does not read, which, to be fair, it partly was. Diane! This was directed at the back office, and it produced results. Diane Rigby emerged, a compact blonde woman with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent 20 years solving problems created almost exclusively by the man standing next to her. She clicked one button, the booking appeared. Geoffrey, to his credit, recovered almost instantly. There we are. The system was playing up, silly bugger. Now then, room 6. Lovely room, sea view. Partial sea view, said Diane, without looking up. Well, it depends on one's definition of... It looks over the car park, Geoffrey. Olivia was handed a key, a metal one, which in this century felt almost archaeological, and directed upstairs. Room 6 was small. It was clean. The window provided, as promised, an obstructed view of 9 parked cars and in the far distance a strip of grey that was technically the English Channel. To see it properly, one would need to press one's face against the glass and look sharply to the right, in the manner of a person trying to see around a corner at a different junction. It was, in the most generous possible interpretation, a sea-adjacent room. Olivier set down his suitcase. He looked at the kettle, the 2 sachets of instant coffee, and the small biscuit wrapped in cling film. He sat on the bed, and the bed made a sound that was not encouraging. He went downstairs for lunch. The dining room of the Shellbrook Hotel seated approximately 20, though it had almost certainly never needed to. 6 tables stood beneath a low ceiling, each dressed in a white cloth that had been ironed with conviction. On the wall hung a framed photograph of the late Queen, positioned with the solemnity usually reserved for religious icons. A teenage boy stood near the kitchen door. His name badge read Danny. His posture read, "Please don't ask me anything." Olivier sat down and studied the menu, which did not take long as it contained 3 items: soup of the day, chicken salad, and a ploughman's lunch. He chose the chicken salad, a safe decision, or so it seemed at the time, and asked for a glass of dry white wine. Danny wrote this down with great care, nodded once, and retreated to the kitchen. Through the door came the sound of Geoffrey's voice. Not the words themselves, but the unmistakable rhythm of a man giving instructions to someone who had not requested them. What happened next would, in hindsight, explain a great deal. Danny reappeared. He placed before Olivier a plate of lettuce, a bread roll, and a block of cheese. There was no chicken. He also set down a glass of red wine. Olivier looked at the plate, he looked at the wine, he looked at Danny, who appeared to be experiencing a crisis of confidence so profound that speech had temporarily left him. I ordered the chicken salad, Olivier said gently, and white wine. Right, said Danny. Sorry, yeah, I'll sauce it. He removed the plate. He did not remove the wine. Olivier, being French and therefore not a man to refuse red wine under any circumstances, drank it. The chicken salad, when it eventually arrived, was adequate. The chicken was dry, but present, which felt like an achievement. The lettuce was fresh. There was even a tomato, a single brave slice, which in an English hotel kitchen in October represented something close to generosity. Olivier was approaching something that resembled contentment when the fire alarm went off. Now, it should be understood that the fire alarm at the Shellbrook Hotel was not a gentle warning. It was not a polite suggestion. It was a sound designed to convey the impression that the building was not merely on fire, but had, in fact, been on fire for some time and was personally offended that nobody had noticed. Olivier stood. Danny froze by the kitchen door, still holding a pepper grinder, like a soldier caught mid-salute. From behind the reception desk, Geoffrey arrived at considerable speed, arms moving in a way that suggested either authority or panic, and almost certainly the latter. Nobody panic, he announced to a room containing one calm Frenchman and one motionless teenager. This is almost certainly not a real fire. Danny, did you touch the toaster? I was making toast for table 4. And you left it unattended? You told me to bring the wine to the French gentleman. I told you to bring the white wine. You said red. There was a pause. The kind of pause that occurs when two people arrive at the same misunderstanding from opposite directions. I said right, said Geoffrey very slowly. As in, right, off you go. Not red, as in, oh, for heaven's sake. It was at this point that Diane appeared. She walked through the dining room without speaking, entered the kitchen, and the alarm stopped. She returned holding a piece of toast so thoroughly blackened that it had essentially completed its journey from bread to charcoal. A thin ribbon of smoke rose from it with a kind of dignity. The toaster, she said, is going in the bin. No, let's not be hasty, Diane. It has set off the alarm 4 times this month. It is temperamental. It has character. It is broken, Geoffrey. Character is not a feature of electrical appliances. She dropped the toast into the waste bin with a sense of ceremony and returned to the kitchen. Geoffrey straightened his blazer, a gesture he appeared to perform the way other men take deep breaths, and turned to Olivia. Frightfully sorry about the disturbance, Mr. Desrosiers. A minor domestic hiccup. I trust your lunch is still... He trailed off. They both looked at the plate. A fine dusting of ash had settled over the chicken salad, lending it the appearance of a meal recovered from an archaeological dig. Olivia picked up his glass of red wine, the wrong wine, the wine that had started all of this, and finished it. Delicious, he said. That evening, the hotel was quiet. The rain had stopped. Olivia sat in the small lounge near reception, where a window offered what was at last a genuine and unrestricted view of the sea. It was dark and still, and rather handsome, in the way that English things sometimes are when they finally stop trying to impress. Diane appeared with a cup of coffee, despite the fact that Olivia had not asked for one, but he took it and was surprised by how strong it was. Extra spoonful, she said. You look like you could do with it. Across the room, Geoffrey passed through, spotted them, and immediately changed course toward a bookshelf. He selected a book, studied its cover with enormous concentration, and placed it back upside down. Neither Diane nor Olivia acknowledged this. Some things are best left unobserved. In the morning, Olivia checked out. Geoffrey shook his hand with warmth of a man who has entirely forgotten the previous day's events, or has at least chosen to. Diane handed him a small paper bag. Croissant, she said, from the bakery in town. She paused. Not the toaster. Olivia laughed, properly, for the first time since arriving in England. Outside, the rain had returned. He walked to his conference thinking that this was a country built almost entirely on the ability to keep going when things have gone wrong, and that there was, if one looked at it from the right angle, perhaps slightly to the right and with one's face pressed against the glass, something rather wonderful about that. So, did you guess the show? It was Fawlty Towers. Fawlty Towers, yes, written by the one and only John Cleese and Connie Booth, and widely considered the greatest British sitcom ever made. And it was only 12 episodes across 2 series in the 70s. And somehow that was enough to become a permanent part of British culture. Now, some could argue that just taking the theme and reading out a short story as an English lesson for you might be taking the magic out of the whole production. But I'd like to think that it is introducing you to the idea of it in general, and that it could pique your interest enough for you to go and watch it yourself, if you haven't already. Because along with many people, I think this is an absolutely brilliant sitcom. And if you have seen it, then hopefully you were able to see how the hotel owner desperately wants to appear sophisticated, but can't seem to ever achieve such a way of being. Then we had the wife, who quietly holds everything together while the husband takes the credit for it. And then the young employee who means well, but gets caught in the crossfire. And then I added a foreign guest, which does happen depending on the episode in the real Fawlty Towers. But I wanted to perhaps help you see yourself as the guest to this crazy hotel in the UK, because that's, I imagine, how you would experience a hotel in the UK. You would be the guest, right? But yeah, I'd say what made Fawlty Towers so brilliant and so British is that the humour comes from recognizing something true. We laugh because we've come across these archetypes before. Okay, maybe not as exaggerated, but there's humor in subtlety too. In fact, the enjoyment very often goes way beyond the viewing of the show itself. It helps us label a type of personality. The show does that for us. And then we go out into the real world and we recognize it in our lives, and we share that observation with a friend who we might know gets that reference of that show that they've seen before. And that in itself is a huge part of my appreciation for British humor, and I think many other people's appreciation for British humor. Spotting the likeness, however subtle, in fact, the more subtle, the more enjoyable or humorous it is to spot it. So yes, as I said, if you haven't watched it, I genuinely recommend it. Again, it's called Fawlty Towers, spelled Fawlty, and then Towers. The language is pretty fast, the humour is physical, and it will give you a window into a side of British culture that textbooks just can't teach you. Now, if you want to actually remember the vocabulary I exposed you to today, then be sure to download this lesson's free vocabulary worksheet that covers the best expressions from the story with definitions, examples, collocations, quizzes. So yeah, scan the QR code on screen or check the link in the description, show notes, or comments. And that link will take you to the page that is visible on the video podcast right now. I've done that quite a bit, and I've realized that people listening to the audio version of this would be like, what is being shown right now? What link are you talking about? Yes, but that link will take you to this page right now. You can fill your name out and email, and that way I can send you it directly to your email inbox completely free. But yes, I hope you enjoyed checking in to the Shellbrook Hotel. I've been Charlie, your host, and I'll see you next week for a different episode of the British English Podcast. Bye for now.